Discretion is a highly valued characteristic. According to the dictionary, discretion is the quality of behaving or speaking in such a way as to avoid causing offense or revealing private information. To be discreet is to have or show discernment or good judgment in conduct and especially in speech. I know that we've talked about this from time to time. Our mouths are so incredibly important. We are creatures of communication, and speech is so very important. All right, well, let's make sure this is on. Yep, nope, it's not on. Okay, there we go. Okay, in the Bible, discretion is several different words are used for being discreet or discretion, and you can look up a lot. There's a lot of different ways that it's used, but in general, discretion is associated with the ability to carefully plan, having good taste, prudence, insight, being perceptive, understanding, common sense, and wisdom. In the Bible, discretion is identified even as a gift from God. May God give you discretion. And something that's prized by rulers. Pharaoh was looking for somebody with discretion. God has created us to communicate with one another and with Him. And we do so with our mouths, we do it with our thoughts, we do it with our words, we use visual media, we use text, tweets, posts. We communicate a lot. So, in this message, any discussion about the tongue or speech, I want you to recognize that it's representative of every mode of communication that we engage in. All right, so this is my SPS. This is my purpose today. Since discretion is a highly valued characteristic, something that we would all like to possess, we're going to spend a little bit of time today looking at what undermines this characteristic and what strategies that we can employ to be more discreet. All right, so part one. What are the situations where our speech demonstrates a lack of discretion? All right, first one is interruption. I'm sorry, when we don't use proper etiquette, okay? So I'm going to label this as not using proper etiquette, okay? So etiquette in speech, etiquette in communication. So the first part of that is, interruption. Sometimes you may see a TV show or a movie where the dialogue is such that no one interrupts anybody. In the morning, we'll sometimes have, what's Sergeant Friday do? What's Sergeant Friday? Sergeant Friday. Dragnet, thank you, yowzers. I am getting old. Sorry. All right, dragnet. And the dialogue is, just so pristine. Wouldn't you just love it if you went to work and you had conversations like that? You watch a show like that or a movie like that where the dialogue's like that, and it feels so strange because we just never see it happen in real life. It's so unusual. It's unnatural to have that kind of conversation at all. Let's go to Philippians chapter 2. So I've got a new workmate, young guy, it's an engineer, and he's a little rough around the edges. He's kind of a bulldog. You give him an assignment, bang, he's on it and done. And we were having a long meeting with our clients. We were talking about the characteristics that they wanted in their buildings. And during the meeting, he was taking notes as he was directing the meeting, and the client started talking about what they wanted in this building, and he says, okay, I know what you need here. Okay, this is what you need. So I gave him a little coaching. I said, look, when a client's talking, shut up. Let them talk. When they stop talking, you can offer your opinion about what you think that they need to do. But here our client was saying, this is what I want, and then you decided, I know better what you want. He was appreciative. He wasn't negative about the feedback that I gave to him. I think that he's got a lot of talent and all that, just like I said, a little bit rough around the edges. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself. I have no idea how many times I've made reference in messages to this scripture. It is a fundamental thing. How would God have me be? How would God have me be? That is a fundamental question I ask myself often. And verses like this one provide a fundamental answer to that question. Don't think you're more important than any other of God's children. When we interrupt one another while speaking, when we cut one another off from expressing their thoughts, it tells them that we believe that what we have to say is more important. We've stopped listening to them, and now we expect them to listen to us. That's poor etiquette. It's offensive, and it shows a lack of discretion when we do that. But it's so common. It's so common, and something we really had to focus on when we're talking with one another. I'm going to stop turning around now because I feel more comfortable. All right. So that's number one, just bad etiquette. Number two, when speaking out of ignorance. And there's different ways that this occurs. One is that we just don't have the education, or we don't have the training, or we don't have the experience. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 14. Let's go over to Proverbs chapter 14. I'm going to be making a lot of references here in Proverbs, primarily here between 14 and 19 and such. So you might want to put a marker there, because we'll be either staying close to there or coming back to it. When I hear somebody without children or who has a newborn is posting parental advice on their blog, or some celebrity who's on their third marriage, or maybe let's just call it a relationship, and they've written a book about happiness in marriage, or folks offering their opinion on any number of topics outside their expertise, I give them their due regard. I don't listen. Proverbs 14, verse 33. Wisdom rests in the heart of him who has understanding, but what is in the heart of fools is made known. Well, foolish people, they are more than happy to tell you all kinds of opinions and positions on things they just don't understand. Don't have expertise, don't have education in it, haven't bothered to do research in it. It's foolish for us to speak with conviction about things that we really don't know. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 17. Proverbs 17:28 says, even a fool is counted wise when he holds his peace, when he's quiet. When he shuts his lips, he's considered perceptive. Even a fool. Several years ago, a man was attending with us, and during a conversation, he mentioned of the euro, the currency in the EU, having a woman riding on a beast. And I'm gonna be a little bit defensive at this point. I probably had heard several different people talk about different conspiracies about this, that, and the other. That, you know, you do a little bit of internet research and you realize that is just not what happened. You know. And so and I've been to Europe. All right, I've had plenty of euros in my hand, both coins and bills, and I said that is just not true. A couple of weeks later, that man walked over to me, and he was in that back corner over there. Now, you're not going to be able to see this, but he handed me this. This is a €2 coin, 2002, from Greece. Any guesses on what's on that? A woman riding a beast. It's a Phoenician princess, Europa, and she's riding a beast. Well, I did acknowledge my error and apologized for my lack of discretion. I'm sure I didn't use those words just like that, but I did apologize and acknowledge that. Something to that effect. That man no longer fellowships with us. I'd like to think that it wasn't because of me, that there were other factors. But you know, that was foolish. I don't carry this coin with me. It's in a basket in my closet, but I dug it out for this message today. I spoke out of ignorance and maybe a little arrogance, and it caused offense, and it was an example of a lack of discretion. That event obviously affected me. All right, another is just a lack of direct knowledge. So there's one thing to have technical understanding, go to school and get education, have experience and things like that. That's one element. But another is just not having direct knowledge. And so a way that we can show a lack of discretion is when we speak with certainty about things that we've been told. Just hearsay. We hear somebody say, well, this is what happened, and then we go off and repeat it, that's what happened. And we weren't there, and we don't have the evidence, but we repeat it as if that's what happened. Let's go to Proverbs 18:17. Proverbs 18:17. The first one to plead his cause seems right. It sounds right. Until his neighbor comes and examines him. It takes discipline to do your due diligence, to verify a story. Sometimes it's very hard to do so. Sometimes it's very hard to find the actual evidence of the event, what was said, what was done, things like that. But too often, folks say that something has happened, or that someone has violated the law, or that someone has said something. And too often we just accept as fact things said to us by those that we feel aligned with. It fits our paradigm. It fits our thinking. Must be true. It was on the internet. It must be true. We need to be careful, because when we speak with certainty about things that we don't really know, it's foolish. It causes offense, and therefore it shows a lack of discretion. Another element would be that it's just a failure for us to take the time to understand something. Just take the time to understand. Sometimes we'll watch old episodes of Family Feud, and it's funny when they're up there. I don't remember what they call it when the two contestants come up and he's going to offer the question. They got to hit the buzzer, but every once in a while you'll see they'll start asking that question. Hadn't finished the question, hasn't finished enough of the question, but of course you got to give an answer. And pretty much every time the result is, right? Wrong answer. Didn't take the time to even listen to the question. And it comes across as being foolish. They look a little embarrassed, and they're like, oh, sorry. Proverbs 18:13. 18:13. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him. Listen. Listen to the question. Understand the question. This is something I really have to work on at work. I do. Because I want to be responsive. I don't want to come across as not knowing what's going on. And sometimes I too, I'm too quick to answer a question posed by my client. Well, are we going to do such and such? Yes, that's what we're going to do. Then I have to get up with the staff and say, we're going to do that, right? Well, that's bad technique. That's a little bit foolish. And sometimes that results in misunderstanding, confusion, and of course it takes extra time to straighten all that out. Well, wait a minute, you said that that such and such was going to happen. Yes, I know, but then I consulted the experts, the people that are actually performing the work, and yeah, that's not what's going to happen. Sometimes we don't think about the problem or the issue long enough to consider the outcomes of our actions. We make snap decisions, and those snap and maybe snap commitments that may be impossible to keep. And so we've got to be careful. I've got to be careful about that. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 25. Proverbs 20, verse 25. It's a snare for a man to devote rashly something as holy, and afterwards to consider his vow. We've got to be careful. Got to be careful. And here we're even told as far as making promises to God without thinking about what the results of that are, what we're actually committing to. I mean, it's certainly not wrong to make commitments to God, to do good things, to improve. I tell you what we're going to do. All the sales that we have over such and such, all of that's going to the church, and then you have a booming year and a whole lot's going that direction. It's like, no. Who knows? I mean, there's 1,000 different ways that we can make promises that are difficult to keep. And then there's other examples that we could go to in the Bible that we're not going to go to. Think about what you're doing. When we don't do that, that's a problem. So many times, I mentioned about, just kind of making overcommitments, even with my clients. So, I might be having a meeting with a client or my workmates, and there's times that because of my role, I do have to push forward. I have to present. I have to bring them together and present. This is what needs to be done. And in the vacuum of expertise, I'm willing to tell you how I think it should be done and when it should be done. All right? If you're not going to jump out there and tell me how we're going to get it done, I will help you get to that answer, all right? But, it's good to recognize that you're doing that kind of thing. And so not uncommon for me to, as I'm doing that kind of exchange, to stop and say, all right, am I barking up the wrong tree? Does this make sense? Is this the right way to go? Am I asking for the right thing? Because you got to recognize that, hey, I don't know all the answers to this problem or this issue. And give them that opportunity to straighten out. So it's, understanding the question, understanding the issue. When we fail to do that, failing to take the time to understand an issue or a problem or a question, popping off with an answer, offering opinion, or giving giving off, some instruction to go do something, without understanding what the issue is a lack of discretion. It's a lack of discretion. I said I wasn't going to turn around, but I am anyway. All right, we're on slide 7. That's perfect. All right, what else undermines that characteristic of being discreet, having discretion, is when our speech lacks fidelity. When our speech lacks fidelity. One of the statements that I learned from Stephen Covey's book on the speed of trust is to be true to those in their absence. To be true to those in their absence. Gossip is speech that causes offense, and it shows a lack of discretion. Simple as that. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 19. Proverbs 20, verse 19. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with one who flatters with their lips. But boy, we just love juicy gossip, don't we? We love juicy gossip. It's so tasty to hear about the foolishness of others, where others have failed, where they've fallen on their face, their indiscretions. And it's all over our media, and too many times it can be a part of our lives. Another phrase from the book Speed of Trust was that what Peter tells me about Paul tells me more about Peter than it does about Paul. Because when we got our mouth going, telling things that are not value added, but just juicy tidbits of, well, at work we'd call it this, that, and chicken fat, but when we do that amongst ourselves, what that tells the receiver is, well, when I'm not here, I wonder what you're saying about me. Lack of fidelity. It's a common problem with mankind, so I mean, it's not something new. Let's go to Proverbs 16. So let's back up to Proverbs 16. Proverbs 16, verse 27. An ungodly man digs up evil, and it is on his lips like burning fire. Can't wait to tell others about it. Dig it up and can't wait. Like I said, it is a common problem. And you know what? It's basically because it helps us feel better when we see somebody else doing something more stupid than what we've done. That's what it does. Something more foolish. For some, it's just intoxicating. Can't get enough. Cannot get enough of hearing about the things that happen to other people, what they get involved in, and very quick to tell others. When we become the storyteller, when we're the ones exposing the failures and the sins of others in a gleeful way, our speech is causing offense, and it demonstrates a lack of discretion. That's what it does. Now, there's a big difference between recognizing something that is sin, speaking out against sin, warning others about sin. Those are not wrong things to talk about. It's not wrong for us to recognize that and to work against that. But the exposing of a specific person's sin to point out their foolishness, that's a lack of discretion. And we need to avoid that. It undermines that characteristic that we want, that's desirable, that our God would have us have. All right, next is when our words devour. When our words devour. Like I've asked before, how would our God have us be? How would He have us be? Our speech should always be toward building up, correcting where it's needed, and encouraging the process. We're all on this journey. We're all in this quest to grow, to be like our God, to be Christ-like. That's what we're striving for. And when we work together, when we are communicating with one another, when we engage with one another, even when we engage with everybody else in the world, our thinking should be toward building up, helping folks improve, highlighting the path. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. Ephesians 4:29, I'll just read this because we're coming right back to Proverbs. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. That's what we're told to do. Don't let corrupt communication come out. Don't let the gossip come out. Don't let that poking fun at people and things like that. That's corrupt communication. Our communication needs to be geared toward, you know what, we're on this journey together. I've fallen on my face, you've fallen on your face, but we're going to pick each other up and help each other along on this journey. When we fail to do that, when we do the opposite, when we follow the world's methodology, that satanic thinking of pointing out the foolishness and the goofiness that people get involved in, because they do. We poke fun at them, make light of it, laugh at them. That's a lack of discretion. All right? Next one, when our words devour. Nope, I already did that one. When we engage a fool. Is that right? Okay, we're on track. I'm going to back up just a little bit because I got lost in my notes here. So I'm going to back up just a little bit. You know, that devouring one another with our words is nothing new. I mean, it's nothing new. And you guys probably haven't noticed all the political ads on television here lately. Sharon and I were talking about if it wasn't for political ads and Medicare, I'm not sure what kind of revenue the television stations would be receiving from advertisement. It's not new. But maybe, because we can look in history, we can see that the division within our country is nothing new. But, you know, maybe it's within our lifetime that we've watched the nation become just extremely polarized. I'm sure it kind of goes like this, you know, sometimes more polarized than others, but it is so incredibly polarized right now. And both political parties spend a great deal of effort and time to highlight any detectable gaffe or blooper. I mean, they are on it like a duck on a June bug, right? I mean, you cannot. I would never go into politics. I mean, I wouldn't be able to stand it. They pick you apart. Every little thing has got to be highlighted. Every little slip. So when a leader misspeaks, they have a misstep, you know, it's it's all blown up. Except, of course, when it's their leader. When it's their leader, like, well, no, come on, give the guy a break. He didn't really mean it like that. You know that. He was just poking fun. Oh, that's all explainable when it's your guy. The other guy, inexcusable. Throw him out. He should resign immediately. That's the world that we're living in right now. Allowing corrupt words that don't build up, to come out of our mouths, or the words that we put on paper, our text, our tweets, our postings, cause offense, and it highlights a lack of discretion. Okay, last one. When we engage a fool. There is certainly time to engage a fool, okay? There are times that somebody might be within the flock, so to speak, that's causing division, is drawing people away, creating strife within the flock. There's a time to engage that kind of behavior, to be protective of one another, But to jump into an argument with a fool shows a lack of discretion. Because fool's not looking for understanding. That's where we get tangled up. We think that somehow if we say it slow enough or loud enough or over and over enough that we'll convince them that they're wrong. It takes discretion to recognize when, look, that conversation is going nowhere. They're not doing anybody any harm over here talking about that. They're creating a problem. Well, then now we've got something that we need to talk about, but different than trying to just convince them of your particular position. Fools are not looking to understand. They already know everything. Fools are not looking for a closer relationship with God or a deeper understanding of His Word. They already know. They already know what they need to do. Proverbs 18, verse 2. Proverbs 18, verse 2. Proverbs 18, verse 2 says, "A fool finds no satisfaction in trying to understand." I'm reading this from the International Standard Version. "A fool finds no satisfaction in trying to understand, for he would rather express his own opinion." See plenty of that. All right, let's go to Proverbs 29. Proverbs 29, verse 9. Proverbs 29, verse 9 says, "If a wise man contends with a foolish man, whether the fool rages or laughs, there's no peace." You're not going to find peace there. And now Proverbs 20, verse 3. Proverbs 20, verse 3. Proverbs 20, verse 3 says, "It is honorable for a man to stop striving, since any fool can start a quarrel." It's honorable for somebody to withdraw from that. Engaging a fool in an argument is foolish. To think that by raising your voice, pointing out the truth in the Scripture is going to win the argument shows a lack of discretion. All right, part 2. So we looked at the things that can undermine discretion in our lives. Now look at strategies that we can employ to be more discreet in our speech. Number 1, tap into God. Tap into God. If any lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who will give it to him. There are things that we can do for ourselves. We can recognize that, every time I stop at the donut shop, I buy donuts, and I really want to stop that, but that's just, every day I stop at the donut shop. Okay, all right. You can do something about that. Change your traffic pattern. Stop going there. That's just a simple example of what we can do. We can do some things for ourselves to change our behavior and manner. But there's work that's got to be done inside our heart and mind that we cannot tap into. We can't just restructure our thinking. We can't reframe the circuitry within our minds that takes us down trails that we don't want to go. And that's when we've got to go to our God and get on our knees and say, acknowledge that and ask for intervention and His Holy Spirit to help us think differently. So when we look at the things that undermine discretion, when you maybe see things in your life that that's an area I've got to work on, tap into God. Go to Him and cry out, "Fix me. Change the way that I think. Help me understand more clearly why I'm going down that path, thinking that way, why I'm getting sucked into that, so to speak." Let's go to Psalm 141. Psalm 141. Psalm 141, verse 3. "Set a guard, O Eternal, over my mouth. Keep watch over the door of my lips." When I was doing some research on this, I read about how the ninja uses a stick with like a strap or bandana or something like that tied around their head. Right there. It's hard to say something stupid with a stick in your mouth, right? All to help them learn more about not engaging in unnecessary talking. All right? Now, if I went to work like that, I would be under the early retirement plan, right? But it just kind of highlights how it got me to thinking. There's always some wisdom in some of the physical things that people do to kind of either restrict themselves or punish themselves. It doesn't really solve the fundamental problem, the way that the mind thinks and the way that the heart feels. So I don't recommend putting a gag on your mouth and going to work. But think about it. I do sometimes bite my tongue. Sometimes it's because I recognize I don't need to say a word, all right? Other times it's just because I don't have anything else to do with my tongue at the time, and I just put it between my teeth like that. But sometimes Sharon will say, "Why are you biting your tongue?" It's like, well. So there's no doubt that sometimes I bite my own tongue as a signal to myself, just keep it shut. Just keep it shut. Let's go to Okay, so we're in Psalm 141. Let's look at verse 4 through 5. Do not let my heart to anything evil, or incline my heart to anything evil, any evil thing, to practice wicked works with men who work iniquity, and do not let me eat at their delicacies. Let the righteous strike me. It shall be kindness. I need that correction. And let him rebuke me. It shall be as excellent oil. Let my head not refuse it. For still my prayer is against the deeds of the wicked. So even the righteous cry out, don't let me go down that path. Help me not go down that path. Correct me when I'm going down that direction. I need that kind of correction. Cry out to God for that. So he's crying, protect me from falling in with the foolish. So what do you think that would look like for God to literally put a guard on your mouth? I picked this graphic here, a little zipper across the mouth. There was a lot more on the internet. Lots of different ways to put something over your mouth. Maybe it's duct tape or a zipper like that. Maybe glue. What do you need to think about right here to help remind you that not saying anything is okay? Tapping into God includes listening to his instruction from the Holy Scriptures. We're reading a lot of different Proverbs, lots of different scriptures about how to control this mouth, how to control this tongue. We got to listen. You got to pay attention. You got to think about it. It's not by osmosis, you know. You got to open the Bible and read it. Think about it. Tap into God. Engaging in the foolish arguments of society is not what God would have us do. Keeping silent in whatever manner it takes is having discretion. That's discretion. All right, next is identify the root causes of indiscretion. So this, like I said, there's things that we can't do. We need God's intervention. We need the strengthening. We need more of God's Holy Spirit within us to help us overcome thought patterns that can be very deep. But here's something that we can do. We put things into God's hand. We've asked for that intervention, that reshaping. All right? All right, so number one is to identify these situations that result in you saying or writing or posting things that are not discreet. It could be the company that you keep. It could be the desire to be accepted by a group. It could be any number of things. I can't answer that question. You've got to ask yourself if that's something that you see that you can improve on. What's doing that? What's causing me to do that? I use the goofy stopping off at the donut shop. I mean, that's just one silly example. But we're always looking at, I shouldn't say we're always, it is always good for us to be looking for how can we improve our behavior? How can we improve what we do? And looking for what's causing me to trip up. So it takes time and effort to do that. So identify those situations where that's occurring. Maybe it's a case of, let's say one of the members here, we were kind of talking about food in the workplace. I told him, I said, my policy was I don't eat anything. I don't eat anything that anybody brings to work, all right? Maybe a piece of birthday cake on a special occasion or something like that. But I mean, if they bring in kolaches or they bring in chips and dip or they bring in boudin or whatever it is, I don't eat that stuff. Just none of it. But maybe for you, maybe it's like, hey, when I like going out. I like going out to lunch with the guys or the gals, right? But it may be at that lunch that some of that indiscreet yakking goes on and you get sucked into it. That's an area where it's like, look, you know what? I don't need to have lunch with those folks because it's pulling me into being indiscreet. And I don't want that. But we got to identify. We have to identify what is driving me those directions. Take time to think about why. What is motivating you to talk in that way or write that way or to be attracted to those things that undermine discretion? And write it down. You see the caption up there? Yeah, think about it, write it down, put together a plan. Now, maybe you're not a writer, and I can appreciate that. Man, Richard's got to write things down because I'll forget. I need to write it down so I can refer to what I thought I was going to do last week, right? So it's not a bad thing to write down a plan. You know, a lot of times people will say, oh, good night. I mean, you know it's never going to happen that way. You know, that's right. The phrase is, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? At least you got a plan. It could have worked. If everything had gone correctly, it could have worked. Put together a plan. This is what I'm going to do, or what I'm not going to do. Or here's what I'm going to do different. Write it down. A plan of action. Make a change. If watching a certain TV network or receiving certain news feeds is drawing you into mudslinging of this world, delete the app. Just delete it. I'll read James 1:25. James 1:25. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. Point here is to, look at it and remember. James was talking about looking into God's law, looking at the instructions of God, and continue in it. When we take the time to look at, what am I doing that's tripping me up? You got to remember and do something about it. Let's go to back to Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3, I'm going to read verse 13 through 26. Proverbs 3, verse 13. Happy is the man who finds wisdom, and the man who gains understanding. For her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things you desire cannot be compared to her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left is riches and honor. Her ways are the ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She's a tree of life to those who take hold on her. We're talking about wisdom and understanding. And happy are all who retain her. The Eternal by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the deeps were broken up, and clouds dropped down the dew. My son, let them not depart from your eyes. Don't lose sight. Remember, pay attention, retain it. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, so they will be life to your soul and grace to your neck. Then you will walk safe in your way, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. We get wound up into the garbage of this world. It can create a lot of anxiety in life, a lot of frustration, a lot of anxious thought. You will lie down, and your sleep will be sweet. Do not be afraid of sudden terror, nor of trouble from the wicked when it comes. For the Eternal will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being caught. The cares of this world, who's in charge, whose party is in control, that is passing away. It is passing away. Neither one of them are really in control, and they certainly don't have the answers. They don't. It's not our salvation. Repentance requires recognition that our actions and our words and thoughts have not been right before God, and it requires us to take personal responsibility for those things and the resolve to make positive change. Make a plan. Think about it. Look at those situations, write it down, make a plan, make a change. So an essential step in becoming more discreet is identifying root causes of our indiscretions. All right. Number 3, speak with intention. Speak with intention. You know, regardless of our best efforts to identify root causes of where we might fall into indiscretion, the reality is that we are going to be engaged in this world. We work with these people. We go to school with these people. We socialize with these people. They're in our families. You know, we are going to be engaged. We're going to be confronted with all these things that can undermine our character. To disregard the fact that others are talking, to offer our opinion on issues that we have no real understanding of, to throw others under the bus, to put others down, or to jump into an argument with a fool. These are things that we can easily be drawn into because we engage with the world. It's all out there. It takes wisdom and understanding and intention. To speak with intention requires the strength to remain calm and composed, to not get drawn in, not get wound up about some of the foolishness of this world. So we may need to practice deep breathing. We might need to count to 10. I'm certainly an advocate of having a 24-hour hold button on the send key, you know. You can hit send, but it won't go out for 24 hours so that, you know, you might rethink. You know, in this world, there's a perception that if you can't make a continuous argument and you can't make your point loud and clear right off the bat, you lose. You lose. That's this world's thinking. It takes discretion to stay silent until you're ready to speak. Sometimes at work, obviously my life revolves around work. Can you tell? I have to let my team know that I'm pondering something because, you know, with the remote workplace and using Teams and teleconferencing and things like that, I like to have my video camera on because I've found that that I do a pretty good job sending body language messages. You know, it's not intentional. But the reality is that, I mean, our world is just so fast-paced that there's this, you know, if there's any empty space, it's got to be filled up. You know, if you don't keep on talking, somebody else is going to jump in there, and you're going to lose. You're going to lose. You know, so you got to keep on yakking. You got to keep on talking. Anyway, so, you know, I'll just tell them that. Somebody will pop off with something, and I'll just look at them. I'll say, I'm thinking. Because I know that sometimes I can pop off, and it's not what I wanted to say. You know? I'm thinking. Let me think about that for a minute. Another good technique to use is reflective listening. Reflective listening. Now, you learn this in conflict management. Reflective listening is a technique where when you have two parties that are in some sort of disagreement, you know, when one party says, this is what I believe to be true, or this is my issue, that the other party must repeat back to the other party in their own words what they understand them to be saying. And to do that in a way that they agree, yes, that's what I mean. That's how I feel. That's what I think. This doesn't always work. You know why? Because sometimes people just want to mock them. We see that a lot in our society right now. You know, you take a position over here, and the other side will turn your words around like, you know, it's like, look, I don't think that we need, you know, I hate to do this. I'm going to talk about gun control, okay? We don't need to have armed guards in every school, okay? And so the opposition will say is that, oh, well, you know, so-and-so doesn't care if your children die today at school. That is so ridiculous, but that's the world that we live in right now. Whatever position people are in, it is taken to the point of just being absurd, some of the things that are said. And we can fall into that trap too, and we've got to guard ourselves from that. It's important when we're trying to understand We're trying to have respectful dialogue with one another to be able to say, I can disagree with you, okay? But I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. You know, be able to repeat it back to them. Say, so what you're saying is this is what you want to do, or this is how you feel. And when they say, yeah, that's right, say, okay, well, I appreciate that, but I see it a different way. So anyway, that's just another technique that we can use in speaking with intention. Proverbs 25, verse 11. Proverbs 25:11 says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. So when we're intentional with our speaking, taking the time to understand the issue, to understand the other's position, and respectfully expressing what we believe to be true, it can be a thing of beauty. It can be. Typically, raising our voice and pounding our fist and pointing our fingers does not reflect apples of gold in pitchers of silver. To be discreet, to have the characteristic of discretion, we need to take the time to consider our words and speak with intention. Next one is very similar to it, speak with transparency. I mentioned earlier in the message about the book, The Speed of Trust, and the concept of being true to people in their absence. I had a workmate many years ago that we were working together. He was working with a client that was rather difficult, that the person was rarely available. They were always in training, or, you know, he just never was able to talk to this person, always had to leave voice messages. And Jim got very frustrated with that, and he left the person a voice message, and he thought that he had hung up the phone, but he had not. Yeah, y'all can finish the story, right? Okay. Obviously, Jim popped off with some things that just didn't set very well with the client. I didn't get to talk to Jim about it because guess what? Jim didn't last much longer, right? He was dismissed. I'm sure that Jim was embarrassed. He regretted making those statements. But that form of regret is not repentance. Jim was embarrassed. He got caught. He didn't feel bad that he treated that person that way. He would have done it to somebody else as well. But I tell you one thing, next time he's going to make sure the phone is actually hung up before he does it, right? Repentance is saying, wow, I've got to change my behavior and make sure that doesn't happen again. I'm going to read to you Genesis 18:13. This is, famous, so I'm not going to tell you anything new. Genesis 18:13, and the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, I shall not bear a child since I am, or shall I surely bear a child since I am old? But Sarah denied it. Verse 15, like, I didn't laugh. Yeah, you did. You did. Maybe you've had that kind of experience too. Might be sitting in your office, you're talking to a coworker, man, that guy's an idiot. I can't believe that he's in that position, and they walk around the corner, and you're like, and I've seen him walk around the corner and not bat an eye, not acknowledge the comment got made, and just said, I need such and such done, or how are you doing with such and such, and walk away. I've seen that happen. Maybe you've experienced that too. So the idea about when we're in the workplace, we're speaking about others, to intentionally think about, what would I say if they were right around that corner? What would I say? Because you can't take those words back. You write them down and you pop off that email, you can't pull that back. I got an email one time from a young man that sent his mother an email and said, look at this scathing email I just sent Mr. Haughee. Obviously, I was not pleased with that. But we had a discussion. I did not include that in the discussion. He knew that I had it because he sent another email apologizing because he recognized what happened. He saw that, oops, wrong distribution. That happened. Can't take those words back. Mark chapter 9, verse 33. Mark 9:33. and 34. And I'll just read this because Then he came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what was it you disputed among yourselves on the road? This is Jesus talking to the disciples. But they kept silent. For on the road they were disputing among themselves about who was going to be the greatest. They were not being discreet. What strategy can we employ to be more discreet in our speech? Consider your words before deploying. And that requires thought, intention, and it requires respect. So like I said, when you're preparing to speak about another person by name, imagine that they're in the conversation. Frame your words as if you would have nothing to apologize because you're going to speak the truth. And do it in a respectful way. Jesus said that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. That's why we need God's intervention to reshape our heart and mind so that doesn't mean that because we're still flesh, that we may not be thinking about some things to say, but have the discretion to say, I'm not going to say that. How would I say that if they were here? What would I want to hear if I was in their shoes, so to speak? Ephesians 4:15 says, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things to him who is the head, that's Christ. Speaking the truth in love. See, when we do that, when we practice that, speaking the truth in love, we should not have anything to apologize for. No retraction, no need to be embarrassed for that. We've talked about 1 Corinthians 13 about love. Love is patient, kind, humble, fair, and calm. Those are aspects of love, and that's how we need to be with one another and to others. So speaking with transparency means that you have no reason to revise a statement because the words were expressed in love. So to be discreet, to have the characteristic of discretion, we need to be transparent. Last one is to be an agent of change. Be an agent for change. A common quote in relation to withdrawing from confrontation or taking the easier path is that discretion is the better part of valor, right? Discretion is the better part of valor. That phrase is from William Shakespeare's play, Henry IV, Part 1. Now look, we shouldn't be looking for the cowardly way out. That's not my intention. We should be courageous people. We've been equipped with the armor of God to fight the battles in this life. So we're not talking about being cowardly. But there's nothing cowardly about withdrawing from unreasonable men that are there to harm you. That's not unreasonable. David recognized it was dangerous when Saul threw a spear. David got out of there, didn't he? Before that was thrown. When Jesus was in the temple, he spoke about being one with the Father. They sought to seize him. He slipped away. And the Apostle Paul, Jews were going to kill him in Damascus. The other disciples let him out through the wall in a basket. So these are not acts of cowardice, just recognizing the danger and getting out of it, getting out of the way. So in terms of public discourse, our conversations, our correspondence, we will face situations where the other parties are not being discreet. So what strategy can we employ that demonstrates discretion? Well, all right, so I got 2 points in this section here. Change the direction of the conversation. Change the direction of the conversation. Galatians 6:1. Galatians 6:1 says, brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Now, I realize that Paul was not talking about folks engaging in foolish talk, but conceptually, I believe the instruction is still valid. Those who are serious about our walk with Christ on a quest to be God's children and all that entails should be an agent for positive change. We should be agents for positive change. And our good example should influence those around us who are also striving to be mature in Christ. Our example should be there for them. Be an agent for change. I told you that I have to write things down because I can't remember, right? So I currently have 9 statements. I'm not going to give you 9 statements, but I have 9 statements on my note in my phone that I periodically refer to. I call them Richard's Rules. Richard's Rules. I'm not trying to compete with the 10 Commandments. I've only got 9, all right? I better not come up with 10. Not trying to compete with the commandments. These are things that I put down. I said, you know what? This is meaningful to me. Number 7, when others are focused on fault finding, counter with a positive observation if you can. Change the direction of the conversation. Somebody's out there just, pounding on somebody. Find something positive to change the direction of that conversation. Be an agent for change. That's being an agent for change. But if folks are tossing too much wood on that fire, point number 2, withdraw. Withdraw. You don't have to make a scene. You don't even have to give an explanation. You can just quietly withdraw, either by not participating or just removing yourself from the forum. Could be in person, could be online. You may be in a group chat or something on Facebook where you're getting stuff that you're like, this is not discreet. Get out of it. Just withdraw. If you can't change that conversation, just withdraw. Proverbs 26:20. Proverbs 26:20. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out, and when there is no talebearer, strife ceases. Quit throwing wood on the fire. Don't participate. When folks stop adding fuel to an argument, the argument stops. Pretty much, anything that we're involved in is voluntary unless we're summoned to court. Then we have to speak. You don't have to speak. You don't have to offer your opinion. You don't even have to offer your correction if you look at that and say, you know what, this correction is not going to be appreciated or used. Withdraw. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6. If you're not able to participate and stay true to the instruction to speak the truth in love, or as we're instructed in Romans 13:10, love does no harm to neighbor. If you're not able to participate in that manner, having discretion demands that you retire from the conversation. Just retire from it. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 3 through 5. If anyone teaches otherwise and does not consent to wholesome words, even the words of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the doctrine which accords with godliness, he is proud, knowing nothing, but is obsessed with disputes and arguments over words from which come envy, strife, reveling evil suspicions, useless wranglings of men of corrupt minds, and disputes of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a mean for gains. From such withdraw yourself. That's what we're told to do. From such withdraw yourself. So a strategy to be more discreet in your speech is to be an agent for change. Change the course of the unprofitable conversation or withdraw. As I mentioned, discretion is a highly valued characteristic. It's the quality of behaving or speaking in such a way that avoids causing offense or revealing private information. As a person matures, they develop patterns of communication. We talk about personality, we talk about manners, and we talk about character. Our character is exposed. Our character is exposed. by the techniques that we use, the actions that we take, the words that we use, how we conduct our lives, things that we write about, how we dress, how we treat one another, how we treat our loved ones, how we treat our enemies. All these things expose our character. So we've looked at 5 ways, or five things that undermine discretion. It's poor etiquette, speaking out of ignorance, being unfaithful to others, devouring one another, and getting involved in foolish arguments. All those things undermine discretion in our life. And we've looked at 5 strategies to help build discretion in our lives. We've got to ask for God's involvement, ask for God to develop us. We've got to take time to think about it, to understand what's causing things in our lives like that. We've got to think about what we say before we say it. And we've got to speak about others as if they're standing right there. And we need to be an agent for change. So we're all on a quest for godliness, right? We're all on that quest for godliness. And we ask ourselves, how would God have me be? Well, I submit to you that God would have us be discreet.